I know it's a book, but hold on. GGY from the new Tales of the Pizzaplex book just blew Security Breach wide open, and we have to talk about it. No time to waste. Put on your apron slices. Let's bake ourselves a theory. Okay, for those not in the know, the Tales from the Pizzaplex books have been pretty forthcoming in their canonicity to the game's timeline. Many of you may know that the Silver Eyes and the Fazbear Frights novels take place in their own canon timeline. It's the book's timeline with the game timeline. They're not directly canon to one another, but some elements remain the same or lend themselves to explain parts from other timelines. Some things in the books can explain the games and vice versa. We've gotten very little word about how that would work with the Tales from the Pizzaplex books though. However, some of these stories seem very important, and a lot of them seem pretty one-to-one with the games. We even get a story detailing how Burntrap may have been delivered to the Pizzaplex in the first place. So when we got to see the story list for this new book coming in March, our jaws collectively dropped when we saw one title in particular, GGY. Is this a story that'll finally tell us more about Gregory? Originally, we had to wait until March 7th, but the incredible Tom on the Reddit Discord, link in the cards, did a live reading. So now we have all the details, and they are juicy. So let's go over a brief and summarized version of the live reading that Tom did. Tony, a 12-year-old middle schooler, is assigned a group project where he has to write a story about a mystery. He wants to find one in the real world, and him and his friends choose to do it with pen names. Tony goes by Tarbell, his one friend goes by Boots for Puss in Boots, and his other friend, a new kid with unruly brown hair, goes by Rab, short for Dr. Rabbit. In search for a real-life mystery to write about, Tony finds that a lot of the arcade machines at the Pizzaplex have unreasonably high scores, all with the initials GGY. So he starts to ask around to see if he can figure out who this GGY is. First, he asks some arcade goers, these two girls who go by KXT and CRF on arcade machines. They point him to a kid named Axel. He doesn't know. He then goes to an employee. The employee has to deal with something, but the employee tells Tony his theory on who GGY is. He thinks that a kid probably stole a security badge to get in after hours, because not only does GGY have impossibly high scores, no one has ever seen this kid. As Tony started to scheme, he noticed that Glamrock Freddy was just deadpan staring at him. Like he walked up to him, stopped, and just stared at him in a cold, weird, robotic way. So he got freaked out and he left. He's 12 years old. When he got home though, he made a bunch of forum accounts to look for any more information. Eventually, somebody DM'd him, warned him that he was in over his head, but told him to DM them again tomorrow for more information. The next day, Tony steals a security badge himself to get access to the databases. He then searches for GGY and found out that someone under the username GGY did in fact get a play pass, essentially a Dave & Buster's charge card, but it's been modified. So much so that it could essentially be used as a security badge to get into the building. He also found out that GGY's badge was used to let in somebody named Mary and two more people, someone with the letters RAE and someone with the letters TRE, all of which were after hours at separate times. He leaves that kiosk to find that Glamrock Freddy is just straight up following him. So again, he runs away. He DMs the forum person again and they say to meet up at the high school. When he goes there, it's actually CRY. Crystal, the girl from the arcade way back in the beginning. She tells him again that he's way over his head, but she tells him why she knows this. She's a bit of a hacker herself, and she hacked into the animatronics one day to try to figure out how they worked. But when she was in there, she noticed a lot of weird protocols that would have them do actions that they don't normally do. And throughout these protocols, sort of like a signature, the letters G and Y were all over them. So she knows whoever this GGY is an incredibly talented hacker. Tony writes all of this for his assignment on his mystery about GGY. While Tony was writing the story, he overheard on the TV that the school guidance counselor Mary Schneider was still missing, and he shows it to his friends Rab and Boots. Rab sees it, doesn't make an expression, puts it in his backpack and says that he'll help work on it later. Later on, Tony finally puts together that the Mary that's missing could be the very same Mary that went on GGY's pass. So he sneaks into the school, into the librarian's office, and gets into the school database. He finds out that the school has actually gone through 4 guidance counselors since the Pizzaplex opened. Mary was the first, and then 2 more went missing before the current one they have now, Raylan and Trina, matching the other 2 names that were on GGY's pass. Tony wonders if the counselors caught on to GGY's plans and planned to turn him in, but then he brought them to the pizzaplex to silence them. The next day, he gets his story back and it's completely ruined. Now it's about this fantasy wizard. All of this was Rab's doing. He calls Boots Ellis by his real name and said he's done with the pen names because he's so mad about their friendship. Tony gets detention for sneaking into the library the day before, but likely he got detention from a snitch because he was outside of the cameras. Then, while he's in detention, Rab comes in to talk to him, or since he's still mad at him, he calls him by his real name, Greg. Gregory apologizes for changing the story, but then convinces Tony to cheer him up by bringing him to the pizzaplex. Okay, this story is a lot, and it's a bombshell. I mean, so that's our ingredients, let's mix them. To bullet point it super simply, a new kid at school with unkempt brown hair and the name Gregory is hacking into the arcades and animatronics and possibly killing counselors. Blah. So right away, this pretty much confirms that Patient 46 is Gregory. After all, Patient 46 is described to be a child, an expert hacker, and actively messing with the pizzaplex. This all fits perfectly. Frankly, the only thing that goes against it now is that some translations used a female pronoun when referring to Patient 46, but that could just be a mistranslation or something that didn't come across on the translation team. So if that's the only thing going against it, it's not very strong evidence. But Gregory being Patient 46 is huge for the story of Security Breach, and also wildly confusing. By all accounts, Patient 46 is working with Vanny, possibly even manipulating her. So if that's the case, why the hell do we see Gregory hiding from her for the entire game? And why does he fight Afton if he's working for him? Something isn't adding up here. While we think about that, let's go over some other information we got from these books. Straight away, there's a fan theory that I need to quash. I've seen some people saying that Crystal might be the girl on the cover of the Ruin poster. Frankly, I think this is from people who didn't read the live reading from Entom, because Crystal's a high schooler. That's not a high schooler, that's a little girl. Although, I do think GGY tells us who this girl might be. I didn't mention it because it's not important to the plot of GGY, but that's why I think it's important to the plot of Security Breach. When the employee had to go deal something, he had to deal with a girl named Amelia with pigtails freaking out about Fruity Maze giving her game over, kicking it and screaming. She eventually gets dragged out of the pizzaplex. It's a weird scene because it has nothing to do with anything else in the story, but the fact that she's directly described and pointed out and then left as an open-ended bookmark makes me think that she's the perfect candidate to be this girl with pigtails that we see in the Ruin poster. This book also seems to imply that Gregory had some sort of security pass to freely go throughout the building before Security Breach. But during Security Breach, he doesn't have it. Someone must have deactivated it or taken it away. Someone like Vanessa, who's on the security team. But if that's the case, we have to again ask why? What made Gregory turn if he was evil and now isn't? Was he ever evil at all? Did he ever turn from being evil? Is it all an act? It just doesn't make sense yet. Kind of like watching this far into the video without hitting the subscribe button. Just saying, doesn't make any sense. I'm just saying. We've got cats. Then again, look at the Ruin poster. Gregory's saying help me. Is this a trap by Afton? Is Gregory actually asking for help? Did he actually turn good? It's unclear. At this point, I was just stumped. So I gave up and went on Twitter. And lo and behold, people smarter than me in this amazing community already came up with some amazing theories. Two of them in particular seem incredibly likely to me. First off, we have @HorrificHymns on Twitter. They go by Ava or T, and their thread is massive. Link in the cards to go check it out. I highly recommend it. But it has to do with proving that Gregory wasn't actually evil in GGY. He just wasn't Gregory. Rather, he was taken over by Afton just like Vanny. She shows this by going into details about the differences between Gregory from the story and Gregory from Security Breach. For clarity's sake, from here on out, when I'm referring to Gregory in the stories, I'll say GGY. But if I'm referring to Security Breach, I'll just say Gregory. She notes that GGY chose the pen name Dr. Rabbit because it just came to him, and he's described as often saying deep, interesting things. What do we hear Gregory say in Security Breach?
I don't know, I'm just a kid.
But for an even bigger difference, in the thread he mentions that GGY as Patient 46 is clearly manipulating Vanessa and working with Vanny. But then we come to Security Breach, and Gregory doesn't even know who Vanessa or Vanny are. He practically can't remember his own name. And he keeps this up even when there's no one around to act innocent for. This possession isn't even a new concept. Ava points out that Vanessa was possessed with the VR machines, so it's possible that the arcade machines could have possessed Gregory. But somehow he was freed right before Security Breach. For more evidence, there is another thread, link in the cards, by Michael O2000. He really goes deep on the therapy logs here, trying to show that Gregory doesn't have to be a robot for any of this to work. The therapist finds records of Gregory's great childhood, something that GGY wouldn't have given, but something that Gregory wouldn't have if he was a robot. In the thread, they also mention that the rewrite that GGY did to Tony's story mentions that GGY was the favorite apprentice of the wizard. This is subtly telling us that Afton has multiple apprentices, and his favorite one is Gregory, because GGY wasn't an apprentice at all. He was a puppet under the total control of Afton. In the thread, they point out that Patient 46 likes disguises because it makes him feel invisible. And that's just what Patient 46 is, a disguise for Afton. Again, a massive shout out to these amazing folks. Go follow them on Twitter and wherever else they are. And with these analyses under our belt, the information from GGY, Security Breach, and Help Wanted, I think we can finally solve exactly what happens to Gregory, Vanessa, and Afton between Help Wanted and Security Breach. So let's pop this mixture into the oven and watch some horrors rise. I think Afton was working directly through GGY, but I don't think the possession happened from an arcade machine. After all, GGY is a new kid in town, and he came around when the pizzaplex showed up. We also know that Patient 46 and Vanessa were getting therapy before the pizzaplex, or at least before and during the pizzaplex. So the arcades wouldn't have been there yet. At least they wouldn't have been there before therapy started, which, I mean, therapy probably started because of how GGY was acting or just to keep an eye on Vanessa. I think that Gregory was taken over by Afton via a VR headset implemented by Vanny. We have a source code conversation, presumably between Glitchtrap and Vanny, that ends with, "Have you selected one? I have." I think this is what they're talking about. They need to get Glitchtrap out of the VR game before it publishes so that they can transfer him into something more secure. Gregory was sort of a vessel for Afton, and with Vanny in the physical world to ensure that Gregory couldn't escape like the last two tried to, this would have been a perfect transfer, leading to Gregory being fully taken over by Afton, turning Gregory into just a puppet, turning him into GGY. That way, GGY is able to hack into Fazbear Entertainment and get Vanessa the job, because Afton is the one doing it. Afton can personally see and implement the hacking and manipulating of the animatronics and the arcade machines to make sure that they're ready to take the Glitchtrap virus. He even modified the animatronics to watch over and protect Gregory and Vanessa, because he knows that GGY's body needs to stay safe and Vanessa's job needs to stay intact for this plan to work. He doesn't want to risk his entire existence, so he takes his time to make sure that the defenses are down and that the Burntrap corpse is put together enough to take the Glitchtrap virus. Finally, the night arrives. Glitchtrap and Vanny are ready to implement the Glitchtrap virus. All the other human staff have been killed, fired, or sent away, and it's just Vanny and GGY. It was time to take the Glitchtrap virus out of GGY and put it into the pizzaplex. But when Glitchtrap leaves Gregory, Gregory wakes up, dazed and confused, and just runs away. At this point, the Glitchtrap virus is in all the animatronics and spreading through the arcade machines. Afton, trying to find Gregory, tests out his new abilities in Glamrock Freddy and searches for him. Finally, he spots Gregory in the crowd, but here's the kicker. Glamrock Freddy was programmed to protect the body of GGY, and the Glitchtrap virus just said to go capture it. So suddenly we have two directly competing objectives: get Gregory and protect Gregory. That's why Freddy shuts down, but then he reboots into safe mode, flushing out the Afton virus, and thus the beginning of Security Breach. That's why Vanessa insists that tonight is not the night to mess with her. Tonight was supposed to be the night they bring back Afton. That's why Freddy shuts down. That's why Gregory has a hard time remembering his own name at the beginning of the game. He's been unconscious for who knows how long. And that's how Gregory, as Patient 46, can have a good childhood but seem homeless. Because at this ending, he's not homeless. He just woke up somewhere he's never been before, confused and scared. He just went off to hide. As far as he's aware, he got a fun opportunity to test out a new VR game, and he woke up with no idea where he was, surrounded by people trying to kill him. This is quite possibly the strongest I felt about a theory about Security Breach. And we have GGY, Entom, Michael O2000, Ava, and the whole community to thank for it. Thanks to the new Tales from the Pizzaplex book, number 5, The BarBADroid's Conclusion, we now know more about the blob, where it came from, and possibly how Glitchtrap got into the Pizzaplex. But be warned, it's weird. So slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. First, let's gather our ingredients. Okay, what is this mythical story? I guess we should dive into what it's about before we discuss it. It's called the Storyteller, named after the main piece of robotics that the story centers around. Here's an as brief as possible recap. In an attempt to lower the budget, head of the company, Mr. Burrows, suggests that they create an AI connected to the rest of the Pizzaplex in order to make up stories and directives for the animatronics and attractions. That way they could fire the creative team and instead focus on maintaining this creation, which they dub the Storyteller. Head of the creative team and old man Edwin is furious at the idea, insisting that it can't work because human creation is what drives Fazbear Entertainment. They go along with it anyway and start creating a gigantic machine in the center of the Pizzaplex, all housed within a giant fake baobab tree. The Storyteller itself is under incredible secrecy as nobody is allowed to look inside the tree. It also has a series of fiber optic cables going from the tree throughout the entire Pizzaplex, acting as a sort of roots of the robotics, but also controlling everything within the facility. It connects to every animatronic housing, attraction, and facility. While they were building it, Edwin snooped around and noticed that they placed the head of the Tiger Rock animatronic inside of it. We're not told his history of the thing, but we are told that Edwin then has a panic attack relating to memories about that animatronic, blood, and screaming. A few months later, when the Storyteller is finished and activated, things start going wrong pretty quickly. The animatronics all take on hyper and aggressive versions of themselves, much like we see in the games. Roxy becomes a bully to customers, Chica becomes really snarky and snippy, as does her cupcake. Note here, Chica is described as being yellow and having a cupcake with her. Definitely not the Glamrock Chica design. Monty is described as being aggressive or isolating and flip-flopping between, and even Freddy takes on this really funny diva role where he kind of just turns into a spoiled child. Edwin knows that this is probably due to the Storyteller, so he does even more snooping and makes his way into the baobab tree. Lo and behold, when he gets in there, he finds that it's one large supercomputer with the tiger head animatronic directly hooked up to it. He does some hacking and finds out the animatronic primarily came with a program called Mimic 1. He then spends the next few days going in every day trying to rewrite this program to fix the issue. Mr. Burrows is informed that Edwin keeps sneaking into the baobab tree, and he then blames Edwin for all these issues. To get back at him, he eventually locks Edwin in when he sneaks in. He does this secretly in case things go wrong, but the baobab tree is airtight. He assumes that within a day or two, when the air starts running out, Edwin will have no choice but to beg to be let out, and people will find out that he's been messing with things. But several days go by, and Edwin never does. Getting paranoid, Mr. Burrows opens the door himself to see what's going on. He finds a dead Edwin in the middle of drawing a stick figure, as well as a piece of paper with a crayon writing, "I'm sorry." Before he can leave though, the door behind him shuts. Mr. Burrows starts freaking out, tries to log in but his password doesn't work, punches the Tiger Rock animatronic head to no avail, and even rips it out of the wall. But even when it's entirely disconnected, all the lights stay on and the Storyteller keeps working. Mr. Burrows suffocates in there as well. This one is a doozy. And even more than GGY was. But we've got our ingredients, so let's start mixing them and seeing what kind of theories start to form. Right away, this primarily seems like the book trying to tell us how Glitchtrap was brought into the Pizzaplex. I don't think that Tiger Rock is canon to the game timeline. Or if they are, they're going to be added in Ruin. But the idea of the Glitchtrap virus being hosted on an animatronic head that was brought into the Pizzaplex, completely reasonable and tracks with what we know. But okay, I hear you. We gotta talk about the goddamn tree. Is this canon to the games? Is it purely a book thing? I frankly have no idea. I know we don't have evidence of a baobab tree in the games, but again, it could be introduced in Ruin. Hear me out. The Pizzaplex has undergone several renovations and continues to do so. Roxy Raceway gets rebuilt every other day when it collapses. We know they had to fix whatever that mess in the basement is, possibly looking more into that in the future. But having a giant tree that was built in the Pizzaplex and crumble and no longer is there, while it's unlikely, it's not impossible. So the real question becomes, if that is possible, is it necessary? Why would this ever have to exist in the first place? Well, let's think about what it was fundamentally. The storyteller was a giant supercomputer housed within a baobab tree. It was eventually powered and presumably corrupted by the influence of Glitchtrap. But most importantly, it had a mass of root-like fiber optic wires throughout the entire pizzaplex. Those wires connected it to everything, so there must have been a lot of them, right? And if the tree is gone, we would have to ask, where did the wires go? Is there some sort of mass of wires hidden deep within the pizzaplex? Yeah, the blob. Something about this thing never sat right with me. Most of us, myself included, took one look at this thing and went, oh, that's the result of the fire from FNAF 6. I mean, look at it, it's a massive burnt robotics, done deal. But is this really what it would look like? The blob is almost entirely wires with some animatronic parts within it. The thing is basically a mass of inky black tentacles. Why would burning down a fake pizzeria and 4 animatronics result in something that looks like this? I think this story is giving us an out, another way of looking at the blob. A centralized AI network that coursed throughout the entire pizzaplex, became corrupted, and was abandoned. And the blob itself told us this. The blob is sporting out a bunch of animatronic parts, but one of them sticks out more than anything else it has. This FNAF 1 styled Chica. Now we know it's not the original Chica from FNAF 1 because we see this Foxy torso in Rockstar Row, and the Foxy torso is rusted and damaged beyond repair, so presumably all the FNAF 1 animatronics would be in a similar shape. This Chica, on the other hand, looks in great condition. It's a little battered and bruised, but it's not rusty. For a while now, I'd been working off the assumption that the newer animatronic parts that didn't make sense were coming from extra copies of the Five Nights at Freddy's special delivery animatronics. But what if that isn't true? The storyteller's story isn't just about the storyteller. It's also about the pizzaplex and the people there, and the animatronics. It goes into detail about how Chica is yellow and has a cupcake. We know that's not Glamrock Chica. In fact, it sounds a lot closer to the FNAF 1 Chica design we already know of, one that would match to the one we see on the blob. If the blob really was this giant wire network that lashed out, maybe it took this Chica animatronic along the way. It wouldn't be the first time that an animatronic was destroyed and replaced at the pizzaplex. We already know this happened with Bonnie. Hell, this might have happened with Foxy too at this point. The only one of the original gang left might be Freddy. But that sounds like a theory for another day. So does that mean the baobab tree existed in the game's timeline? I don't think so. Hear me out. Just because the Tales from the Pizzaplex books have been a lot more closely linked to the security breach continuity than the previous books have been, we don't have to assume that everything in these books is one-to-one with the games. When they have direct parallels, that's great, but I think much like the original trilogy, the books are primarily here to tell us what is possible within this universe, so we can apply that logic elsewhere. It's almost like the books are giving us the rules to a game that we already bought the pieces for. One of the stranger things in the storyteller, in my opinion, is the centralized unit Tiger Rock. I really don't know why this animatronic was chosen. Like, don't get me wrong, he's cool and all, but I think he's just in the books. We have absolutely no mention of a tiger animatronic or a baobab tree anywhere in the game timeline. I think that these are our parallels. I think what this book is really trying to tell us is, hey, at some point in the history of the Pizzaplex, there was a big hollowed out thing built to house a centralized robotic system. That centralized robotic system had wires going throughout the Pizzaplex, and the head of an animatronic was placed on it to aid in those wires doing what they needed to. But the head had the Glitchtrap virus in it, and everything started going wrong right around then. Now, our job is a bit more straightforward. All we have to do is figure out what this giant thing was and what head could have been placed on a massive wires to cause all these issues. And I think the answer has been right in front of our eyes the whole time. Another thing that always bothered me is on the path to the Afton boss fight. This giant Freddy head makes no sense. Granted, I've heard some people explain it away as part of the signage for the FNAF 6 building, but I don't think that's true. First off, we get this art of the FNAF 6 building, which doesn't look anything like something that would have a giant Freddy head. Sure, we have this sign, but it's in 2D. But more than that, look at the model. That's an odd Freddy head. That's not FNAF 1 Freddy, it's not Toy Freddy, it's not Funtime Freddy, it's not even Rockstar Freddy. The closest Freddy that head looks to is Glamrock Freddy. Maybe like an older version of him. That, plus the fallen infrastructure around it that matches the infrastructure within the pizzaplex, makes me think that this was part of the pizzaplex that caved in. I think this giant hollow Freddy head was an attraction, possibly our baobab tree. Alright, that's settled, but now we need something to attach to the computer and by proxy the wires. Something that could have housed the Glitchtrap virus. Well, let's look at the blob. And guys, sometimes the simplest solution is the answer. I know it seems improbable, but what if it's just Funtime Freddy? After all, it's the current centralized unit of the blob. Why wouldn't it have been the centralized unit before it became the blob? It seems pretty perfect, but I hear you. Why Funtime Freddy? Why would he have the Glitchtrap virus? To be honest, I'm not sure. My best guess is that there's been a slight retcon in the design of Molten Freddy. We know that Ennard split up into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy when they couldn't get along, but I think Steel Wool might be trying to redesign Molten Freddy into having the original Funtime Freddy mask, not this amalgamation of junk. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure though. Maybe we'll get more insight into that in Ruin, but I don't have a better answer than this, because honestly, I don't know where else Funtime Freddy could come from here. All that aside though, let's pop our mixture into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. Earlier into the pizzaplex, but not too long ago, the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment wanted to cut corners, save some time, and rekindle the old wonder of Freddy Fazbear's franchise. He wanted to see if they could run the entire pizzaplex from one centralized AI network, basically have it run itself. He could cut labor, cut programming, and even cut creatives. It was perfect. And what better way to house this computer than inside the face of the franchise itself? A giant Freddy head, one that could greet guests and tell jokes, but also could house a supercomputer inside. A supercomputer whose wires went throughout the entire pizzaplex, connecting to charging stations for the animatronics, Rockstar Row, the arcade, the atrium. They implemented it and it worked fine, but it was missing something. That little spice of life that was always in these animatronics. The CEO ordered that they went and go found the old parts that were used to scan into the VR system. Surely something there had to work. But if they did that, there's no way that the VR development team wouldn't hear about it. The VR development team that Vanny was a part of. Vanny informs Glitchtrap, and they hatch a plan to put Glitchtrap into whatever they think of bringing to that storyteller. Eventually, it's decided that they'll go for an old Funtime Freddy head. But before they take it out of there, Vanny implements the Glitchtrap virus into its programming. And just like that, Fazbear unwittingly gave complete control of the pizzaplex back to Afton. Total access to the animatronics and all the facilities. So then what happened? Why did they fail? Because something else was on that Freddy head. Sure, Glitchtrap was in the software, but the hardware was possessed by something much stronger than a virus. The spirits, the remnant or even agony or both, of restless ghosts. Cassidy, possibly the other missing child incident victims, remained. And this clash sent the supercomputer into overdrive. Wires started flying, animatronics went awry. Chica even destroyed herself and was taken by these wires. And before anyone could do anything, the whole head collapsed into the floor, burying itself under the rubble. Then, Fazbear did what Fazbear does best and paved over the mess, hoping to cover up the incident and leaving whatever that angry mess of wires was to hopefully stay. Whew, okay. Right away, do I think that that is 100% correct? No, not really. I'm not super confident on how the blob went from being this supercomputer throughout the pizzaplex to hidden underground at a place nobody but Vanny is supposed to know about. That part I'm super foggy on. Frankly, we don't have any information there. I kind of just guessed using what we have and what we know is possible. However, until proven otherwise, I am 100% certain that these two pieces belong together and are where the blob came from originally, and probably where Glitchtrap was inputted into the pizzaplex in the first place. It just fits so beautifully, and it parallels perfectly with the books. It explains this head that we've had no explanation for, and it gives more reason to the blob other than, I guess it's just a mass of wires. The vengeful spirit, the one you should not have killed, the dweller of Golden Freddy, Cassidy, is in in Security Breach. But by the time we find her, she's already lost. Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. I get it, that's a tall claim, but bake with me here for a second. For those unaware, one of the prevailing theories in the community is that Golden Freddy is possessed by the vengeful spirit, one that is vowing to follow Afton wherever he goes, trying to take him down every step of the way, all because the spirit of this vengeful person possessed the Fredbear suit after being stuffed inside it, being killed at the missing child incident. That's why we see Golden Freddy in every game William is in. In FNAF 1, Springtrap is locked in a back room. Golden Freddy is there. FNAF 2, William had just gone on a massacre. Golden Freddy is there. FNAF 3, William returns as Springtrap roaming the halls. Lo and behold, Golden Freddy is there. More than that, if William isn't there, Golden Freddy doesn't make an appearance. FNAF 4, which takes place in the mind of either the crying child or Michael Afton, William isn't there, and we don't see Golden Freddy because of it. Sure, we see Nightmare Fredbear, which is a nightmare version of Fredbear, which eventually becomes Golden Freddy, but Golden Freddy himself does not appear. What about sister location? Sure, it's William's bunker, and Michael Afton is down there, but William is nowhere to be found. And once again, no Golden Freddy. Now, I hear you, what about FNAF 6? Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. William Afton is here, for the first time named credited, so it's definitely William Afton. But Golden Freddy is nowhere in this game. And that's correct. He isn't. Oh, and you aren't either. And that's correct. Golden Freddy isn't here, but the spirit inside him is. But who is the spirit inside Golden Freddy? Some people, myself included, argue that there are two spirits within the Golden Freddy suit. But even if that's true or not true, I'm just focusing on the vengeful one that's definitely in there. Thanks to the FNAF security logbook, we have a name, Cassidy. Cassidy has to be present at the FNAF 6 fire, mainly because of what we know about Ultimate Custom Night, of which we'll get to in a moment. If Cassidy is present at UCN, she would need to be at the FNAF 6 location when it burned down. And if you look at FNAF 6, there's really only one location that wandering spirits could end up in, Molten Freddy. After all, their erratic movements on top of their weird, almost echoey voice seems to imply that there's multiple drivers of that ship. And of course, we know Golden Freddy is in Ultimate Custom Night, not only as a character that can be brought in by Dee Dee, and not only as the ending cutscene of the game where you get a slowly zooming out cutscene of Golden Freddy twitching, but Golden Freddy is the only animatronic that death coins don't work on. If you try to use a death coin on a Golden Freddy, a Fredbear animatronic jump scares you. The only way you can see the Fredbear animatronic. Alright, so that's the end of Cassidy, right? The original 7 games chronicle her going after William relentlessly until eventually trapping him in Ultimate Custom Night and torturing him forever. Wrap a bow on it, ship it, call it done. But there's 3 games I haven't mentioned yet. Using our previous method of looking for Cassidy, we'll examine them. FNAF AR has Springtrap in it, sure, but we recognize that the animatronics in FNAF AR are recreations, not the real thing. The real William Afton is nowhere to be found, and likewise, Cassidy's presence is pretty much null in this game. But then, what about Help Wanted and Security Breach? They both have an iteration of William Afton, whether digital or physical, but do we have any mentions of Cassidy? Well, sort of, in the form of Princess Quest. Now, I won't spend too much time on the connections between Cassidy and Princess Quest and the reasons why, mainly because Ozone already made an incredible video going over the themes and motifs of Princess Quest and how it can relate to Cassidy. Link there, I recommend you go watch that after you're done here. But for now, very briefly, this princess is Cassidy. Again, lore and analysis reasons, there, after you're done here. But just for now, some hard evidence to hold you over, in one of the patches of Security Breach, the sprite for this character was named Cassidy. So we're gonna roll with it. The Princess Quest minigames were both in Help Wanted and Security Breach, so even with this new digital form of William, there's a digital form of Cassidy hunting him down. Okay, so what? Cassidy's back, that's pretty typical. Well, that's not the whole story, because I don't think the Princess Quest 2 and 3 machines are what they appear at all, because I don't even think Cassidy makes it out of Princess Quest 1. The new Tales from the Pizzaplex books are chock full of lore, and at this point most people know about that. It's what gave us more information about the Mimic, basically confirming that William Afton is dead. And in his stead is a robot with a program intending to recreate his lost legacy, just trying to, well, mimic him. But the Mimic isn't the only important story from Nexie, the 6th book in the series. The story Nexie suggests putting an endoskeleton inside of a body, which leans really hard into Burntrap territory. So then what about the middle story? Drowning. Well, for the uninformed, Drowning tells us the story of Kara and her friends trying out the new VR attraction at the pizzaplex, the resort. Essentially, it's Sword Art Online's your body into one of 3 attractions: roller coaster, water park, and the beach. The attraction only lasts about 5 minutes, but you can pay extra to experience Hyper Time, where they shoot adrenaline into your body, making it feel like you're in the game for much longer. All the way down to an hour long at setting 1. But if you turned it to setting 0, the person would feel like they're in there indefinitely. It's not safe to do that. Kara sneaks back into the attraction after her friends move on, and convinces a worker who's about to go on break to let her in, put her at 1, and send her to the water park. Which he reluctantly does, but because of his nerves and being called to cover another shift, he accidentally leaves it set on 0 with no supervision. The rest of the story sees Kara wandering through never-ending water parks of different themes, but more and more frequently seeing a girl at the bottom of the pool. She's incredibly pale, wears all gray, has long black hair, green eyes and green veins pointing to her eyes, black fingernails, and black teeth. She beckons Kara to the pool, begging for help and asking to not be left alone. Kara feels sorry for her, especially because she reminds her of her childhood friend Peggy, who died in a way that Kara possibly could have prevented but was too scared. She thought this is her chance to make that right. But when Kara tries to help the girl tries to pull Kara down, attempting to drown her in the pool. Kara breaks free, but the girl appears in every pool Kara walks past. Even when she took a break to sleep in a pizzeria-themed location, she woke up to see the girl halfway towards her crawling on the ground, and she realized that she's not safe even on land, and that she has to keep moving. What feels like days go by as Kara wanders water park to water park, eventually hitting on 2 important areas. The first, an old wooden house, where supposedly she finds out more about this girl in the pool. She finds what looks like the girl's room, what looks like her parents' room that has signs of a struggle and the smell of blood, as well as a picture of the girl and her parents with clothing from a different time period. The house does start to flood though, and Kara runs to the attic, where she finds a bathroom, a tub, and the girl in the tub water inside. But when she gets too close, the girl grabs Kara and pulls her in. They're transported to a larger area of water and Kara breaks free. The next area of interest is a mirror maze. Kara walks in hoping it would be safe, but before long, it starts flooding too. In the mirror maze, she starts seeing reflections of her friends and her parents complaining about her and saying mean things about her, really delving into Kara's worst fears. Eventually, the story ends when Kara finds a water slide with no ladder stretching all the way up into the ceiling through a glowing hole in the ceiling. Hoping that's her way out, she climbs the exterior of the water slide to try to get there. But when she's nearly up, she hears the voice of the girl once again beg for help. It scares her, and she falls. Now with broken legs, the girl from the pool simply drags her into the water and drowns her. Back in the real world, when her friends finally find her at the VR attraction, they go to yell at her, but when the headset comes up, they notice that she's dead. Story ends. Okay, I know that was a lot, but the books are becoming more and more lore relevant, so we have to take those little literary detours every now and then. Sorry. But the real debate around this story is what the identity of that pool girl is. Some folks are saying that it's a manifestation of the Mimic 1 program, and for a while, I did too. After all, this girl is aggressive. Sure, she only ever begs for help, but the moment Kara gets too close, she tries to drown her. Something that Cassidy wouldn't do. The girl also reminds Kara a lot about her childhood friend Peggy, who died young. A tactic that Mimic 1 would definitely use to try to ensnare somebody, just like William would use facts about children's lives to ensnare them. The green eyes and veins pointing to the eyes also point to this connection. But then, there are issues here. The other side of the argument points out that when Kara is describing games she used to play with Peggy, trying to figure out how to survive now, one of the games she mentions is Save the Princess, a pretty direct nod to Princess Quest in the games. The Princess Quest that sees Cassidy as the princess. Furthermore, a character inextricably linked to Cassidy is Old Man Consequences, always seen fishing by a pond. But each time you meet him, either as Cassidy or the player of FNAF World, you can force your way into his lake and drown. The ending you get by doing that in FNAF World is even called the drowning ending, the same name of this story. So the girl always being at the bottom of the pool works here. Another point for her being Cassidy is, although she is violent towards Kara trying to drown her, she is always begging for help, asking to not be left alone and wanting help from Kara. Furthermore, her description is quite close to how we've seen child spirits depicted in the games: gray clothes, pale skin, black hair. And if the house they went into in the water parks truly is a memory, then the picture tracks too, because the people in it look like they were dressed from a different time period. Drowning takes place sometime during a pizzaplex, so at least around 2025 plus, probably 2030. Cassidy would have been killed back in the 1980s. That's a 50-year time gap. We are 7 years away from being 50 years away from the 80s. God world. However, this house also has a point for the Mimic 1 side, as the girl being in a bathtub seems to imply that she was killed via drowning, which, as far as we know, isn't a tactic William ever used. Although maybe that's what FNAF World was trying to imply, and maybe that's why she's so vengeful, it's unclear. Both sides have valid points here, so which one could we possibly choose? Well, I think it's rather simple. The girl in the pool isn't simply the ghost of Cassidy stuck in this game, nor is she a manifestation of Mimic 1. It's much worse than that. So Slices, let's pop our theory into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. She did it. Cassidy had won. Finally, through life and death and rebirth, she stopped William Afton. His reign of tyranny had ended. Cassidy held William right where she wanted, unable to die, move on, and find peace, stuck in a never-ending torment of Cassidy's design. Or so she thought, because while they were in that burnt-down, demolished pizzeria, someone unearthed them. Someone took William's corpse for something. Cassidy leaves the Ultimate Custom Night space to ensure that William isn't somehow coming back again, but it looks like he did. She sees Burntrap and the blob, and immediately goes back to work. Her first order of business? Manipulate an arcade machine. Try to get into the system that William might be in. There's even a possibility that she's done something similar to this before, if she helped out with Happiest Day or with the FNAF World. The obvious choice for possession is Princess Quest. She goes through the minigame and finds traces of William, but nothing too significant. But then, she found it, and what she found was way too much for her to handle. It wasn't Afton's spirit, which she expected, not even close, but a program created to mimic everything it saw. She can handle spirits possessing robotics, but as a spirit, what can she do about a program? She wasn't prepared for such a powerful threat, let alone prepared to what would happen if she walked directly into its trap. Mimic 1 just laughs at her, says that it always comes back, and the game ends. It always struck odd to me that the game just ends there. And the next one that we play, Princess Quest 2, per Ozone, starts with a parallel to Old Man Consequences in the same room, which I agree with, but that's the crux of the theory. In every other game, you find Old Man Consequences when you messed up, when something bad has happened, because Princess Quest 2 and 3 never happened. Or at least aren't happening in the same way that Princess Quest 1 does. What we see at the end of Princess Quest 1 is Mimic 1 winning. He traps and engulfs Cassidy, eventually even turning her into a slave as he did Vanessa and Gregory. The girl in Drowning, that's her. Even if the story Drowning hasn't happened yet or in the way at all of the games, that's what Drowning is trying to tell us. Cassidy is somewhere in this code as well, but she's different. She's begging for someone to save her, but will kill anyone that comes close. She's still the girl Afton killed, but now she's the rage that Mimic 1 created. Or I'm looking way too much into this stuff. Let me know. Look, I'm running out of stuff to talk about with Security Breach. Unless some news about Ruin comes out soon, I might have to talk about another FNAF game. But tell me what you think. Is the drowning girl Cassidy a manifestation of Mimic 1 or something else entirely? In the meantime, a huge shout out to the best patrons, the Toasted Slices, Emberisk, Charlie Bean, Lovey Puppy, Stormachow, Just BKZ, Lola Fembo, The Viper 26, Lihan, James Reiner, Emily De La Sierra, Snowblossom, Comrade Nika, Raven Eris, Glamrock Bonnie is an Agani, Bucky Ray, Mystic Angel, Supermoosh, Untrusted Life, Queen Coda, Dionysus, MD Switchy, Flip, Loose, BarBADroid, Emmy Layton, Sharpwire, Kitty Demon Overkill YT, Ryunosuke Akutagawa, Angermations, Nayubi, Cursed Galati, Otterpops 456, Dusk Enith, ICG, Silly Goose Central, Mac Dave, Airfan, Sumi, Moose, Kiwi Dylan, Sharktooth, Inkline Game Studio, Big Fart, Skyfon Set, Daylove Bunny, Alex P, Mercy, Altname 7, FNAF Boys, Wesley Harden, Simp Moodles, Kylie Del Pazzi, Chickpea, Funtime, Thomas Harris, A Human, Lavender, Chance Marie, and Balin42. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, Slices. The newest Tales from the Pizzaplex book is starting to make its way early to shelves, and I can't get my hands on it yet. I'm trying my best. My Barnes & Noble usually puts it out early, but they haven't yet, so I can't find it. But some very kind folks in the community have been posting screenshots and summaries of the book, so I know what happens. And this FNAF book is huge. I'll definitely be making a few videos on some of the stories, but I want to start with the epilogues, specifically what it tells us about Burntrap. So Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. First, let's gather our ingredients. So what exactly happens in this book? Well, I'm not going to summarize all of it because frankly, I would just be plagiarizing summaries I've already read, like the one ID's Fantasy put on Twitter. Go follow her, by the way. Instead, I'm just going to go over what's important for today's discussion, including some of the info from the past books. So, spoiler alert for these books. We'll start with the most recent book, Tiger Rock, specifically the epilogue within it. Now, for those who haven't read any of the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, the epilogues follow an endoskeleton named the Mimic and how it kills a bunch of people. It begins with the endoskeleton arriving at the construction site underneath the Pizzaplex, specifically at the FNAF 6 pizzeria. A few construction workers were given directions to take apart the staff bots that were littered around the place, but one of the construction workers notices that the Mimic has specific good programming on it and decides to program it to take apart the staff bots and pile them up. And it does this pretty well. It saves them a lot of time. Unfortunately, he didn't put a stop function in it. So once it runs out of staff bots, it turns to the construction workers and starts ripping off their heads and limbs and putting them in a pile. The first story ends there. The rest of the epilogues follow a group of teens that break into that pizzeria to try to sneak around and then have to survive. The teens begin getting killed off one by one, but throughout this process, we learn a lot more about the Mimic. We learn that an entire line of them was produced by Fazbear Entertainment. They were made to fit into any animatronic costume and could be programmed just by watching things and, well, mimicking them. It was supposed to be a cost-cutting measure, but they were discontinued after they recreated human interactions in unexpected ways. In Tiger Rock, we specifically hear about one of them mimicking hide and seek, and that it learned it long ago. This could imply that it saw one of the missing child incidents and started recreating that, but we're not sure. In another story, The Mimic, we learn even more about it, that the original one was made by someone named Edwin Murray, and it was built to recreate the actions of his kid, David, so that his kid would have someone to play with. But after David died, Edwin beat the Mimic senselessly and infected it with agony, which is why it does its daily chores, but in a violent way. Oh, goodbye. So much hair. Back to the present, and at this point we just are left with Kelly and Lucia. All the other teens are dead. They get the idea that if they hide in animatronic costumes, the Mimic might not notice them and will just walk past as they try to escape. Eventually, the Mimic walks past and they put this to the test. It works for a moment, but the Mimic takes interest in what Kelly is wearing, a blue dog costume, and it decides to put on the costume, crushing Kelly inside incredibly violently, like vividly violently. This is a very violent series of books. It's likely that this fusion could have caused Burntrap. The current speculation says that this is how Burntrap was made, fusing into Kelly's corpse. Now, there's more things from these books that I do want to talk about when we theorize, but I'll bring them up in context. So for now, let's take our ingredients, mix them together, and see what kind of theories start to form. Right here is where I need to make something very clear up front. This isn't a woe is me thing or anything like that. This is just getting ridiculous. Until the games have good, solid evidence of any of the characters in these epilogues existing, then I don't think saying confirmed, keyword confirmed, not probable, not likely, not I'm speculating, not even I think or believe, saying the word confirmed, I personally think is a little strong. You can theorize that the books are in the continuity. Obviously you can. You can make assumptions they are. You can personally believe it 100%. I'm not stopping you. I have no horse in that race if you want to believe that. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has the right to dictate to anyone else what they can or can't believe. I personally don't see strong enough evidence to link the characters from the epilogues to the games yet. I'm willing to change my mind on that. I just personally would like to see some in-game evidence of Kelly or anything like that before I go assuming that they are 100% in the same continuity. And guess what? That's my right to, because everyone is allowed to disagree with whatever they want, including me. That's totally fine. This is a theory channel after all, not a fact channel. It doesn't affect you, so be kind and move on. It's wild that I have to say that about a Pizza Bear game, but here we are. That being said, currently, I personally believe that these books are functioning in a similar way to the novels, albeit a lot more closely connected. The Silver Eyes novel trilogy gave us additional context and information about Five Nights at Freddy's, while telling a different story. They gave us methods and rules for this universe. So, what are the Tales books trying to give us? Well, specifically for this theory, I think there's definitely a recurring theme in these stories of merging the lines between animatronic and human, synthetic and living. And a lot of people have been picking up on this blended boundary in these stories, from things like Billy trying to be an animatronic in B7, or Astrid being turned into an animatronic by Nexie, and even now with the possibility of the mimic fusing to Kelly in this horrific incident. I think one of the things that these books are trying to do is tell us how Burntrap came to be. However, I don't think that that's just what the endgame for the epilogues will be. Here's why. First off, I don't totally see how crushing somebody's body with an endoskeleton could turn into Burntrap. Burntrap looks deliberately fused together, they are intertwined and laced around, but Kelly's death seems more accidental and chaotic and just brute force, rather than a surgical connection. Second, and I've mentioned this before, I don't personally yet see any direct evidence or indirect evidence of Kelly existing in the games, let alone being Burntrap. Do I think it's possible or even likely that this just kills Kelly and this mimic endoskeleton later in the epilogues becomes Burntrap? Totally possible, totally likely. But I don't yet see how Kelly becomes our main antagonist of Security Breach. It's weird video game storytelling, especially because the stories themselves in the Tales books already gives us a way more plausible version of Burntrap's creation in Nexie. Now this is one of the 3 stories in the last book of the series, Nexie. Well, the story is Nexie and the book is named after it, so they're both Nexie, technically. It's one that I think was overlooked because it mostly seems pretty separate from anything important in the FNAF games. It feels like one of those stories that they just add onto the book to tell a fun, cool, spooky story. Because, admittedly, on the surface, it does seem rather unimportant to the grand scheme of things, but I actually think it's very important. So, spoiler alert, but I'm going to catch you up on the summary of Nexie. Not super in-depth, but at least the important points like we did for the epilogues. Essentially, it's Ron's gone wrong, but violent. Okay, but seriously, Nexie follows the story of a poor girl named Astrid who wants a buddytronic. It's a 2.5 foot tall plush with an endoskeleton and programming inside of it, so it's basically like a walking and talking living doll. She finally is able to get one, but as it's being built by the weird automatic Build-A-Bear machine they have, the storyteller starts going haywire. The machine almost breaks, but it does produce a doll, a malformed, coldly staring, not quite right doll. But Astrid loves it anyway and takes it out. When the doll starts to look around and gain consciousness, it notices that many of the kids at school pick on Astrid and the doll for looking undesirable or ugly. Astrid assures her that it's what's on the inside that counts, but the doll is certain that both of them are ugly and both of them could be better. Days go by and the doll gets more and more obsessed with looking conventionally attractive. It also becomes more and more violent in defending Astrid. Eventually, Astrid caves, and the doll convinces her to sneak into the animatronic spare parts room in the pizzaplex and build them a new endoskeleton. Specifically, build the doll a conventionally attractive, correctly proportioned, larger endoskeleton. And she does it pretty successfully. But when the endoskeleton is built, the doll doesn't use it. Instead, the doll kills Astrid and fits her body around the endoskeleton, making her into a weird, living animatronic. Okay, now do you see why I think this book is so important? We literally get a person being surgically grafted onto an endoskeleton. This is how I think Burntrap was made, in a way. Not literally this story, but this method. It would certainly explain things like how the body and the endoskeleton are so entwined. At least it explains it a bit more logically than just brute force. There are still some issues with this though. First off, how does the Mimic come across William Afton in the first place? And when it does, how does it know to just put on the suit rather than do literally anything else with it? And furthermore, there's still the issue of things not quite lining up between Burntrap and the Mimic, specifically in physical description. Things like parts of the Spring Bonnie suit being there, or the eyes not being the right color, the head not looking new, etc. Some things just don't add up still, like how 77.8% of you watch these videos but don't subscribe because it's free and it really helps out the channel. Thank you very much. So how does this all add together? What do I actually think happened before Security Breach? Well, let's pop our mixture into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. As Glitchtrap and Vanny begin to prep the pizzaplex to become their hunting grounds and laboratory, Glitchtrap, otherwise known as the Mimic 1 program, knows that it wants to perform two actions. One, it wants to recreate what it's been seeing and help Wanted, and two, it wants to re-enter the physical world, so it can do that. So what better than the endoskeleton that the Mimic 1 program originally came from? The Mimic. Vanny and Glitchtrap have it shipped to the pizzaplex through the same DLZ shipping company that they shipped most of the animatronics from. You can see that connective tissue in this FNAF video. They then bring it down to their base of operations, the old FNAF 6 pizzeria. Therein lies the remains of William Afton. The Mimic sees that old, burned, barely put together Spring Bonnie suit, and it tries to put it on. It mashes the body, nearly destroying the corpse inside. Vanny, still believing that she's loyal to Afton, not really knowing about what the Mimic is at this point, realizes that the corpse of who she's trying to follow is being destroyed. She needs to salvage this. Carefully, she grafts this mess together to preserve whatever was left of William Afton. Just like Nexie, she fits this body onto the endoskeleton, and it's then that the Mimic is fused with William Afton's body, creating Burntrap. This explains one key detail that still doesn't have a very clean explanation: the difference in eye color. In the novels, the eyes of the Mimic are always described as big and white, crystal clear, but Burntrap clearly has large black eyes. This is that explanation, because when the Mimic and William fuse, the Mimic is infected with William's agony. For those who don't know, the books introduce a substance called agony. We know about Remnant from the games and books. It's essentially soul-made material, this silvery substance that can be infused into animatronics and give them life. The books delve into the idea of the yang to that yin, agony being the strongest human emotion, infecting objects all on its own, typically turning them pitch black. We see this with Shadow Bonnie in the books, or with Blackbird, or even Shadow Bonnie in FNAF AR, in where agony is called Dark Remnant. I think William's agony is the reason why Burntrap's eyes are black. And when all of this is said and done, Burntrap begins to recharge and goes into that charging station that we find him in. Or I'm wrong, which is super possible, especially with Ruin around the corner. Ever since Security Breach released, the absence of Bonnie was one of the most prominent questions we've had. The game teased this mystery constantly, yet barely gave us any definitive information about him. Then when Ruin released, Steelwool literally showed us the actual broken shell of Glamrock Bonnie, and yet somehow managed to only give us more questions about him. But I think it's been enough time. The community has answered a few of these questions, and I think I'm here to answer the rest. So Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. Let's start by going over everything we know about Bonnie from Security Breach, Ruin, and any other associated media. From Security Breach, we honestly don't get much. We get this definitive image and this likely image from a Bonnie bowling sign and a child's drawing respectively. We also get 3 messages that reference him in some way. Missing, which reads, Security Report, 12:24 a.m. Bonnie is seen leaving his green room in Rockstar Row, heading east towards the atrium. 2:40 a.m. Bonnie enters the East Arcade. 4:12 a.m. Bonnie enters Monty Golf. Understudy, which reads, Management Report. With Bonnie out of commission, we're making Monty the new bass player. Parts and service have already done the proper adjustments. This could be a good thing. Monty could be even more popular than Bonnie. And retheme, which reads, Management Report. The bowling alley needs a retheme. While most of the Bonnie art was removed, kids keep asking, where's Bonnie? Do we have an officially approved response? The only other information we get about this rabbit is that his claws are specifically designed to allow him to play bass. But they're also able to be very destructive, like what we see with Monty. But other than that, information on this guy kind of dries up. To be honest, Ruin isn't much help either. Granted, we get some more information, emphasis on some. We get to see the official story given out by Fazbear Entertainment. Essentially, Bonnie retires from the band, gives his base to Monty and just goes on with his life. We also get to see the still active shattered remains of Bonnie behind the bowling alley in a back room, eyes still lit, broken bowling ball around his head. Notably, there is one more bit of, I guess you could call Bonnie information: the wet floorbots. This is a bit of a mystery so far in the community, but basically there are 27 wet floorbots that you can find scattered throughout the ruined DLC up until Bonnie Bowling. They have glowing eyes, and while you're wearing the mask, they scream at you in this echo and chorus of voices. While you're wearing said Vanny mask, you can actually deactivate them. Their eyes turn off, the screaming stops, and they lurch over. If you manage to do this to all 27 of them, one more spawns in the corner of Bonnie Bowl, and if you deactivate that one, it opens a secret room where you can find 4 more surrounding Bonnie, and if you deactivate all 4 of those, finally Bonnie's eyes turn off. So all in all, there's 32 wet floorbots that are somehow connected to the power of Bonnie. So what's the deal with this? Like, what's actually going on here? We've got several questions to answer, and I'm going to try to answer them all. In my eyes, the most pertinent questions are: 1. When was Bonnie destroyed? 2. Who destroyed Bonnie? 3. Why was Bonnie destroyed? And 4. What is the connection between Bonnie and these wet floorbots? So let's go chronologically down the list and knock out the first 2 questions. I had always been personally hesitant to assume that Monty was the one that destroyed Bonnie, at least specifically out of jealousy or want to join the band. It just never sat right. For a long time, mainly before Ruin, I had theorized that Vanny programmed Monty to destroy Bonnie in order to get parts to repair Burntrap with. But then Ruin came along and showed us that all of Bonnie's parts are still behind Bonnie Bowling, so that motive is kind of not good anymore. That doesn't have any evidence backing it up now. The method, however, still makes sense to me, but a fellow theorist just came out with a theory that pretty much fully convinced me. Last week, ID's Fantasy put out a video going over the weird, mushy part of the timeline between Security Breach and Ruin. It's really good, go check it out here, after you're done with this video. But part of that video goes over what possibly happened to Glamrock Bonnie, and she, along with inspiration and additional evidence from Glam Mike Trash on Tumblr, posited that this prototype Freddy was actually the one who committed the act. And the method and surrounding context here does make a lot of sense. After all, like I've been saying, Monty has so much animosity and aggression towards Freddy, but no evidence of it towards Bonnie. There's a lot of really good evidence and other information about this in her video, so I do recommend watching that when you're done here. But using that theory, we can place Bonnie's destruction pretty early in the timeline, and say that a prototype version of Freddy was the one to do him in. The questions that still remain, however, would be: why did prototype Freddy destroy him, and what is the connection with Bonnie and the wet floorbots? Well, I've got some pretty compelling evidence for the second one, but the first one is admittedly a little rough. I'll be honest here. There is incredibly little evidence for a motive behind Bonnie's destruction, prototype Freddy or otherwise, frankly. The best I can offer here is some kind of speculation based around the context of what the animatronics were going through at the time. That speculation would be Glitchtrap and Vanny first tried to overtake the prototype version of Glamrock Freddy before any of the other animatronics. The thinking here might be that because it was a prototype, it could have had less security protocols and be easier to breach in general. And although it was, whatever it did have did not mesh well with overriding it by Glitchtrap's virus. Specifically overriding the relationship that Freddy and Bonnie had. They were incredibly close. Freddy doesn't go into the bowling alley on account of how much he misses Bonnie. In Bonnie's green room, there's not only a Freddy statue on his desk, but a signed poster that says, "Forever and ever, love Freddy." In other words, Freddy and Bonnie are boyfriends. This is canon. I don't make the rules, I just say them. Anyways, in the opening cutscene of Security Breach, we see Freddy short circuit. Now he does this when he presumably targets Gregory, and if the books are to be believed, he is very close to the boy that he thinks is Gregory. At the time was GGY, but that's neither here nor there. So if a regular version of Freddy short circuits and pretty much passes out when trying to target something it likes, I can imagine a prototype Freddy could have just went wild and start lashing out at everything around him when the program told him to target something he liked, aka Glamrock Bonnie. So maybe it went on a rampage and destroyed Glamrock Bonnie above Monty Gator Golf. And that's the best explanation I've got so far. Maybe someone else can help, but that's what we're working with right now. Now let's move on to something kind of equally loose, but something I feel much stronger about: the wet floorbots. One thing that stood out to a lot of us in the community is that in the files, the wet floorbots are tracked by a counter labeled souls. When one is deactivated, the counter decreases by 1. So if this is something that means something and isn't just a fun nickname the devs gave it, then that would be implying that each wet floor bot has a soul. But why? Where would they even come from? We're talking about 32 individual wet floor bots, each with their own soul. Where would we even get that many victims? If we think of confirmed victims, the only ones that come to mind are from the security breach alleyway ending, in which we see Gregory pull up a newspaper that says, "Missing, local residents continue to disappear, and 9 silhouettes." So I tried to see if there's any way you could link the silhouettes in the paper with the wet floor bots, and I don't think this is the right way to go about it, but the best way you could argue for the newspaper silhouettes is if you take one silhouette away because Gregory's right there, assuming that this silhouette is Gregory, then we have 8 silhouettes and 32 wet floor bots. So you could divide that and get 4 wet floor bots per soul, and maybe just because they're small, the soul gets split up. Now, I don't think this is true, but I'll go into why. But technically, very technically, you could argue we have one piece of evidence that can support this. Now, I don't think this is likely, but if for whatever reason you want to argue for this explanation, twice in these games, we see something that could be hinting towards a soul splitting into 4 robots. In the beginning of Security Breach, we see 4 staff bots surrounding a broken staff bot on the ground, and in Ruin, a broken Glamrock Bonnie surrounded by 4 wet floor bots. I think these are both just give gifts, give lives references. But if you want to, you could make the argument that this is a subtle way of the game telling us that some souls can be split into 4. But again, I don't think that's true. 1, it's a stretch at best. But 2, the counter that tracks the wet floor bots is called souls, not parts of souls or soul parts or anything like that. For a cleaner answer, I think we would need 32 victims to match up with 32 wet floor bots. And I still think we would need some kind of connection for why they would choose to possess essentially service equipment of all things. Wait, service? Service workers? Fazbear employees. Okay, so as some of you may know, Security Breach had several messages referring to something called the all-staff meeting. Essentially, all service staff were required to attend this, and at this meeting, it's incredibly likely that they were all fired and told they were going to be replaced by staff bots. But it's been theorized as well that Vanny took this opportunity to kill off all the remaining staff that were starting to catch on to what was going on at the pizzaplex. That would be a large amount of dead workers, but the issue is we never really get a clear number. Luckily, many have theorized the location of this meeting. Notably, in FNAF's first Security Breach theory, he goes into this location, the cafeteria of the loading dock, where we find the message pink slip that goes into the workers being replaced. This whole area is dirty and damaged, but specifically this corner of these sectioned off tables are heavily damaged. The majority of signs of a struggle are in this location, the same sectioned off tables that are right in front of a massive sign talking about staff bots. And logically, it would make sense if the meeting just took place in this corner. They probably wouldn't take up the entire cafeteria, just section off the tables they need. If you've ever worked in an environment like this, you've seen this happen. So I counted every single chair in that sectioned off area, and I got 25. So not 32, but those aren't the only missing Fazbear employees, are they? Because in the therapy CDs we can collect, we meet a total of 5 therapists. Now, 1 of them is confirmed dead and 2 are confirmed missing, but it's heavily implied that all 5 end up dead. That would bring us to a total of 30, which is closer, but it's still not quite there. All the evidence we have suggests that 25 Fazbear employees were killed at the all-staff meeting, and that 5 therapists that were employed by Fazbear were also killed. And that's where I thought the trail would go cold. But the duffel bags had one more trick up their sleeve: 2 exit interviews. One of them is a message from a perspective of someone trying to beat the Princess Quest machines. Arcade conspiracy. Quote, "Exit interview. They're working together, the arcades. They are hiding something. The glitches. Glitch them all at the same time. Then the princess will recognize me. She's testing me. I am not yet worthy. The others are protecting it. Let me stay. I am so close. Just one more night, please. I can save the princess." The other one is catching on to what's happening here. Night shift. Exit interview. Of course I got stuck in the arcade. Every time I exit the security office, I get locked out. If it's not my low clearance level, then I need a stupid party pass. I'm on the security team. Shouldn't I have access to everything? I swear those things are messing with me. This place is not safe. Give me my $100 and I'll go. Both of these employees were being interviewed before leaving the pizzaplex, and both of them on some level knew something was going on. If Vanessa was the one to conduct these interviews, then it would make sense if Vanny wanted to tie up loose ends and just kill them then. In fact, killing them off might have been the inspiration invitation for the all-staff meeting in the first place. And if those two are victims, that would bring our total up to 32, the exact same number of wet floorbots. So if that's true, why are they connected to Bonnie? One thing to note is that Bonnie is powered on at first, something that, being back there so long, should be impossible. However, we've seen power in these animatronics go on much longer than they should if they're currently possessed. But who would this 33rd soul be? I think it would be someone also introduced within the Ruin DLC. I've been a big proponent of the theory that Cassie's dad is much more important to the plot of Security Breach Ruin than we're giving him credit for, because I think he was the only technician at the pizzaplex to truly begin to understand what was really going on. And because of that, Vanny or someone associated with her ends up bumping him off. Cassie's dad was a lot of things, but what's important to today's theory is that he was a mega fan of the franchise and Bonnie was his favorite character. He also knew what happened to Bonnie. If he was trying to fix this pizzaplex, maybe even because of what happened to Bonnie, then upon dying he'd definitely have some unfinished business. What exactly am I implying here? Well, bake with me for a second as I lay out exactly what I think happened to Glamrock Bonnie. Cassie's dad, on the brink of discovering everything that Glitchtrap and Vanny have been doing at the pizzaplex, is killed, silenced, a problem wiped clean by Vanny and Glitchtrap. But his job isn't finished. He needs to save this pizzaplex, and he needs to ensure his daughter will be okay. His restless soul moves its way into his favorite animatronic, Glamrock Bonnie. But once in, although he's powered it, it's been too damaged to be able to move. He's trapped in this back room, trying to extend into anything he can reach nearby. But as he lay back there, he can sense his fellow Fazbear employees one by one being killed off, just as Charlie did before him. As we've seen in the earlier games, FNAF likes to have someone to shepherd the souls. Charlie is off either doing something else or has moved on. Cassie's dad is the new shepherd. He begins to lead his coworkers into somewhere that they can still remain in this world, the wet floorbots. At some point, Vanny begins to catch on that more and more of these wet floorbots keep staring at her, screaming at her in any way they can, terrified of that mask. And she sees the same glow from Glamrock Bonnie's eyes. She tries to deactivate and breaks a bowling ball over his head, but nothing works. She moves on, she's got bigger fish to fry, but that rabbit thing stays in her mind. Maybe someday, someone else with the Vanny mask can get rid of it for good. Is that definitely the deal with what these wet floorbots are? Dude, I don't know. I've been wrong before. Right, you're gonna stand and pace around for every single one of your videos now? Dude, I don't know, go do your homework. We've done the Mimic, we've done wet floorbots, we even did Glamrock Bonnie. I think it's about time that we take on the mystery, what is Glamrock Foxy? Or where is he, more accurately? What happened to the log flume? What happened to his themed area? Why does he have a section at Kids Cove? Was he ever even at the pizzaplex? Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. I guess we'll start by gathering some ingredients, by going over literally every single hint we get about Foxy in the games. And I mean hint, because we don't have a lot to work with, especially in Security Breach proper, where he's really never mentioned once in a duffel bag message, or a loading screen, or a hint, or really anything. But even with a complete lack of being mentioned, there's a lot of Foxy memorabilia and merchandise all over the pizzaplex. He gets an entire standee of this Captain Foxy movie in Rockstar Row that takes up a significant chunk of it. Not to mention the Captain Foxy posters that are plastered in like every other room. In the main atrium, there's even this admittedly bare bones entire area seemingly devoted to Foxy in front of Kids Cove, where we have a giant Foxy statue, other standees referencing the Captain Foxy movie, and even this hidden alcove in this giant ship right next to him. And he's not just mentioned in the set dressing. One of the most hidden areas in the game, the secret room above the daycare where we get Balloon World and a bunch of lore, it's like a really important room, is hidden behind a Captain Foxy poster. Not just hidden behind it, but you have to seek out the characters on that Captain Foxy poster to get access to it. Security Breach, the base game, literally makes you look for Foxy all over the pizzaplex, but the actual game never mentions him once. So realistically, we had no leads. This was all we had to speculate with. I even did some decent speculation myself. It was one of my first really big videos on the channel, but admittedly, it was closer to fanfiction than an actual theory. I had previously speculated that Foxy was just never at the pizzaplex. Instead, Fazbear was building the foundation to bring him to the pizzaplex and trying to means test his branding in the meanwhile. Essentially, Fazbear was trying to figure out if people actually still cared about Foxy enough to bring him back, and while they did that, they were building something that was like pretty bare bones and easy to take down, but in case people actually really loved Foxy, they could quickly make it this whole grand thing. At the time, I even connected it to real-world business practices that places like Sheetz did. For those who don't know, in Pennsylvania, Sheetz is a gas station, convenience store kind of place, similar to your 7-Elevens, except they're way better. For a while, they had what was called the Soda Cave. It was a walk-in fridge that they held big cases of soda in. No one really knew why except for Sheetz, because they knew about a certain law in Pennsylvania, a law that says that convenience stores or anywhere that sells gasoline cannot also sell alcohol. Pennsylvania is very strict with their alcohol laws. Like, you can only have a certain number of liquor licenses per county. For example, in Lancaster County, there are only 3 available liquor licenses, so there's only ever going to be a maximum of 3 liquor stores in the entirety of Lancaster County. The funny part about that is, John Herr, owner of the Herr's brand chips and lives in the Herr's mansion at Lancaster, bought one of the liquor licenses so that there can only be 2 liquor stores in the county. He has stated he never plans to open a liquor store, he just didn't want 3 in the county. Anyway, rant aside, Sheetz built this soda cave to prepare for the inevitability of that law being repealed. And wouldn't you know it, the moment Pennsylvania repealed the law, thus allowing Sheetz to sell alcohol, within a week, every single soda cave became a beer cave. I essentially thought at the time that Fazbear was doing this with Foxy. They were building this big kids cove area, making it vaguely Foxy themed, and if people liked Foxy, they'd put him in full force. But granted, there really was no evidence for this because there was no evidence of Foxy at all. It was more so speculation based on real-world business practices. But now with Ruin, we have so much more evidence to work with. Right after Roxy's Salon, we get to a hidden away area that was previously unknown and unseen in the main game, the Foxy log flume. We get to see a few Foxy cutouts as a cowboy, which was weird, but I mean, it's kind of cool. Also, dope steel wool reference. And don't forget, of all things, for whatever reason, the pause menu gives us some of the most lore about this area. Quote, they never did finish the Foxy log ride. Safety concerns. And before you ask what those safety concerns are, the environment does answer it for us. You can sort of see this in game, but if you go out of bounds and turn off the shading, you can very clearly see why the Foxy log flume was never opened. The whole, it wasn't big enough. I mean, there could have been other reasons, but this staff bot makes it pretty clear what one of the main issues was. We have some more visual indicators of some of the issues. I mean, you can see this wannabe Captain America staff bot trying to hold things together. I get the sense that the staff bots just aren't very good construction workers. And we have one more tidbit about the character with this very cute Foxy and Chica standee with what looks to be like a birthday setting. Finally, the only other information we get about Foxy is through the item descriptions. But realistically, the only item description information we get about Foxy is that Cassie really liked going on the log flume. It was never finished though, so I guess she just went down the big drop and then got off because her dad worked there. Do we know what happened to Foxy? I've seen a lot of people suggest that we've actually already seen Foxy in both games for a while, except now, Foxy is Roxy. And I don't personally believe that, but there's a lot of evidence for it, so we should go over it. On the surface, there is a decent argument to be made here. After all, their names are incredibly similar, and they're both based around dog-adjacent animals. Granted, that is all we kind of had to work with off of the base game, but the DLC did add fuel to the fire. After all, the Roxy Salon is right next to this Foxy log flume, leading some to speculate that this desert area was originally intended to be Foxy's, but has been slowly converted to Roxy's over time. But again, that is kind of all the evidence for it. And while I do understand that theory, I see the connection, it's perfectly valid to think that. In my mind, it would make more sense if they were meant to be a duo that worked off of each other. I think the original plan was the Roxy Salon and the Foxy Saloon. If Fazbear was to take Foxy and try to turn him into Roxy, to me that would read like they were trying to erase his existence from ever being here in the first first place. Just brush him aside and be like, oh, Foxy was never here. But Fazbear is not doing anything to hide Foxy's presence at the pizzaplex. He's plastered all over the place. He's got a giant statue in the main atrium. Fazbear wanted Foxy to be here, and in Ruin, I think we see what his implementation was meant to be. I think they were planning on making a matching Foxy saloon right next to the Roxy salon, and have those two characters share that space. Why a saloon? Well, first off, it's Western themed, and it seems like they were trying to make Foxy into a sort of pirate cowboy, but think again to the standees we see at the end of the log flume area. They're birthday themed. Sure, cardboard cutouts aren't the be-all end-all, but think about what cardboard cutouts are meant for. They're put in a place as decoration. If you had a decoration specifically for eating cake at a birthday party, it seems like that would be a decoration reserved for a place you eat at. I think it's very possible that this is implying that an eatery was planned to be here as well. That, and if they already wanted the names to be similar with Foxy and Roxy, Saloon and Salon seems very fitting. I think this makes a lot of sense. But then the question still remains, where did Foxy go? Was there some kind of accident with the log flume that was so bad Fazbear decided to just wipe away the entire thing? What was Foxy even doing if the log flume wasn't up and running yet? Well, I do think there's one plausible location for Foxy to have been at before the log flume was implemented, the daycare. Okay, so bake with me for a second. In the story, in Somnophobia, it is the third Tales from the Pizzaplex book, we get a lot more information about Sun Moon, and we learn that Sun and Moon were not the original daycare attendant. Originally, Sun and Moon were just a stage performer in the daycare theater. Their whole gimmick was what we see in the game. Once the light goes off, Sun turns into their evil moon side. But for whatever reason, at some point, Sun and Moon were transitioned to become the daycare attendant. Now, they couldn't get rid of that programming, so instead, they just made sure the lights never went off. Weird, I know, but it's Fazbear. Do you see what I'm getting at? If Sun and Moon weren't the original daycare attendant, who was? What about the giant statue right in front of the main entrance to the daycare from the atrium? Foxy. Between the Kids Cove theming, his presence in and outside of the daycare, and even his connection to the secret daycare room, I think there's a decent argument to be made that Foxy was the original daycare attendant. Now, I would have no idea why he isn't anymore, or if there's some kind of incident that happened, and I don't even technically think that's the most likely solution. I just think it's possible. But really, I do think there's one much more likely option right in front of us. Let me tell you what it is. I was going through the item descriptions to try to find any lore for this goddamn fox, and something struck me as somewhat weird. There is some lore attached to this plushie and some of the other merchandise, but look at the item names. AR Glam Bonnie, AR Glam Chica, AR Foxy. And in the designs too, all of the new merchandise of Bonnie uses the Glamrock Bonnie design, even the golden version, but the Foxy versions of the same lines use the original Foxy design. What if there was never a Glamrock Foxy? We know that Bonnie has been gone for a while. If the Tales from the Pizzaplex games are at all similar to the timeline or the same one, regardless of what you believe, Bonnie's been gone for a really long time. Glamrock Bonnie is not mentioned in any of them. At best, in the storyteller, it mentions that an animatronic in Bonnie Bowling was going awry. So maybe that's talking about Bonnie, but even then, it mainly refers to Monty in that story. And yet, even though he's been gone for a seemingly very long amount of time, we still get duffel bag messages about him and his absence, but we get nothing for Foxy. We have canon designs and hints towards Glamrock Bonnie and Security Breach, but we don't have anything for a Glamrock Foxy. We even get to see the remains of the original Glamrock Bonnie in Ruin, but again, nothing even close to that for Foxy, because he wasn't out yet, but maybe they were planning on implementing him soon. One of the more annoying parts about knowing where you are and navigating the Pizzaplex and Security Breach is the massive amount of cover and construction right outside Roxy Raceway and Roxy Salon. We know that there's a sinkhole under the area, and it's under constant repair, but why would all of this be necessary for something that's under the raceway, not the entrance and Roxy Salon? Not to mention, at the actual raceway itself, there's some construction equipment, but it's nowhere near as covered up as the entrance is. I think that's because they were in the process of building the Foxy Saloon. Look around in that area we see in Ruin where we get all the Foxy information. It is filled to the brim with paint cans, spray paint, and other decorations. It seems like they were putting the finishing touches on this area, not taking it down. Sure, you could chalk the paint being in there up to like a retheme for Roxy or something. But the structures are still very much themed around Foxy. And if you've ever done any kind of construction or building, painting is one of the last things you do. If you count putting furniture in, then it's the second to last because furniture comes last. But as far as building a structure or remodeling a structure goes, you end with paint. It's how you end the whole job, which to me implies that this area was almost finished, not recently being taken down. So what am I trying to say here? Let me lay this out straight for you. Here's my theory, not fact, don't get angry at me. Business at the pizzaplex was going well, but whether out of wanting to try something new, bring back someone old, or hell, maybe they even were trying to brush past the Bonnie incident, and then they did this to do that. I don't know, I have no motive for this. Regardless, for whatever reason, Fazbear wanted to bring back Foxy. It started small. They began by adding merchandise of Foxy in random locations and seeing how people reacted. And seemingly people liked it, so they upped the ante and added that big old standee we see in Rockstar Row. People once again really liked it, so they went all in and started making a giant Foxy themed area right outside of Kids Cove where the majority of the young children would pass by, and all of them seemed to love it. Again and again, the people were telling Fazbear that they liked Foxy and they wanted him back. Not only that, but with all these additions, it became more and more clear that the public was asking where Foxy was. So they wanted to make it a big grand thing. They closed off part of Roxy Raceway and Roxy Salon and began building the Foxy Saloon and Foxy Log Flume. If they wanted to make this big old intense ride, they put it right next to the other adrenaline-seeking ride they had, the go-kart area. Not only did they cover up their construction, but they blocked off the viewing of it from most of the atrium to not spoil the surprise. Of course, construction took a long time and it still was never safe enough to open, but before they could really get some human hands in there and try to solve this problem, I think the all-staff meeting happened, or something similar, where human workers began getting replaced with staff bots, which is why in that area, we do see those signs saying that staff bots should be the one to do this. And although the staff bots are fairly competent as security guards and waiters and things like that, they probably made for lousy construction workers, as we see at the end of that area. Mistakes kept happening and progress nearly completely stopped. And for however long after until security breach, the Foxy area and Foxy himself were never able to be finished. It just remained an unfinished project of the long list of Fazbear mistakes. So what do you think? Admittedly, it's loose at best. But personally, I do think Foxy not being there to begin with is more likely, that was a really loud noise, is more likely than Foxy literally being turned into Roxy.